A happy family is enjoying a wonderful vacation together aboard their yacht on the Caribbean Sea. Julia, the mother, dives into the water for a swim, and while trying to relax, feels something strange beneath her. She can't see anything around her, so she chalks the feeling up to her imagination. Seconds later, the unsettling feeling comes back. Still seeing nothing, she grows alarmed and starts swimming back toward the yacht. Suddenly, something seizes her leg and she screams desperately for help. Her daughter Cassie can't hear her with headphones on, while her husband Tom and son Ben are absorbed in fishing. Julia battles to keep her head above water as it floods into her mouth, making it harder and harder to cry out. Tom eventually notices Julia is missing and scans the water until he spots her in serious trouble. He rounds up the kids, steers the yacht closer, and leaps into the water after her. He reaches Julia quickly and pulls her close to keep her above the surface. Tom swims them both back to the yacht, where the children help pull them aboard. The family gathers around Julia, who has no idea what happened and assumes it was just a strong current. That evening, the family celebrates together, relieved and reunited. The family is happy to be together again, but not everyone is thrilled about the cake. Cassie steps outside with her laptop to take a private call from her boyfriend. He shows her massive storm clouds forming over the city just before the video call cuts out and freezes. Cassie races back to tell the family, but Tom brushes it off as poor signal from being too far out at sea. A loud noise draws everyone outside, where they spot a pod of whales gliding past. Tom explains that whales navigate by Earth's magnetic field, but severe storms can disorient them and drive them toward shore. Without warning, the yacht shakes hard and Ben is thrown to the floor, fearing hull damage. Tom gears up and dives under the yacht to take a closer look. He resurfaces moments later with a deep cut across his shoulder. Julia stitches the wound as Tom recounts feeling a presence behind him and turning straight into the propeller. Whatever had been circling him was enormous, yet completely invisible. Tom also found severe damage to the yacht, making it clear they need to call for rescue. Julia works the radio frantically while Cassie scours her phone for signal, but both come up empty. Cassie jumps in fright at what looks like a creature, but it's only Ben messing around with a mask. Before long, the yacht is wrecked beyond use, and the whales have completely disappeared. The family is left stranded in the open ocean with their vessel dead in the water. Julia manages to catch a faint voice on the radio, but it's nothing more than garbled static. Tom figures they have enough food and water for 4 days, so their best option is to wait for a fishing boat to pass. The radar suddenly flares and a strange sound fills the air. The family rushes outside and watches in shock as several massive objects streak down and slam into the ocean all around them. One crash lands dangerously close, and Tom frantically tries to force the engines back to life. As the engines struggle forward, another fiery object plunges down nearby. The family clings together in terror until Tom realizes the falling fireballs aren't meteorites at all, they're satellites. Ben then spots smoke beginning to billow up from the yacht. Tom checks below and confirms the engine is completely burned out. Strong winds begin to build and the family retreats inside, unaware that the compass is spinning out of control. The yacht pitches violently again, sending Ben crashing down and getting hurt. Tom fights the battering wind to retrieve life jackets from an outside storage box and brings them to the family. The power suddenly goes out, and Tom rushes to hit the reset on the power box. When the lights flicker back on, Ben notices blood streaming from Julia's nose. Julia grows dizzy while Cassie sprints to the sink and is violently sick. Tom keeps working the radio but gets no response. Suddenly, a deafening high-pitched screech fills the air, and the wind escalates to a terrifying pitch. Julia fights desperately to hold the doors shut, but a hatch bursts open and the windows begin to shatter. Tom shoots a flare into the darkness just before everything goes black. The next morning, the family comes to in stunned disbelief, shocked to be alive amid the ruins of the yacht. They step outside to an impossible sight. The oceans have vanished, and the yacht rests on bare, exposed seabed. The family climbs out of the wreck and surveys the vast, empty ocean floor stretching before them. After standing in stunned silence before the endless desert of exposed seabed, the family tries to figure out their next move. Cassie searches for a phone signal with no luck, while Ben pokes at 2 dead crabs on the ground. Tom checks the compass and realizes the Earth's magnetic poles have flipped. The last time this happened was over 700,000 years ago. Cassie breaks down when it dawns on her that her boyfriend is almost certainly dead, locking herself away and refusing her mother's comfort. While Julia and Tom take stock of their remaining supplies, Ben ties his birthday balloons to a rock, hoping to signal any other survivors. Tom tries the radio again without success, and Ben's attempts are equally fruitless. Tom manages to reach a man called Now, the captain of a stranded submarine. Now's vessel is also stuck on land, and he confirms the pole reversal has caused the oceans to drain away and flood the continents. Now reports he's found no other survivors and warns that most communication systems are offline. Based on seismic activity, Now believes the poles will shift back within a week and the seas will return. Now urges the family to get to higher ground because the ocean's return will be violent beyond measure. Now's crewmate didn't survive the crash, and the submarine has space for only 3 more people. Julia and Tom persuade Now to take their children, and he sends them his coordinates. Tom estimates the journey will take 2 to 3 days, and tells the family to get a good night's rest before setting out at dawn. The next morning, as the family packs their supplies, Tom spots something moving in the distance. It turns out to be a limping man armed with a makeshift harpoon, with a barking dog at his side. Tom walks over and hands the man a bottle of water, but the language barrier makes communication impossible. The moment the man finishes drinking, he smashes the bottle across Tom's face and kicks him to the ground. Julia watches in horror as the stranger lunges for the harpoon. The man moves with terrifying speed, leaving Julia no time to intervene. The stranger drives the harpoon deep into Tom's stomach. Tom convulses on the ground and the attacker slashes his throat. The man turns on Julia, hurling the harpoon at her and grazing her shoulder as she runs. Julia sprints to the yacht, grabs her children, orders them to hide, and bolts the doors. The siblings hide inside the sofa while Julia hands them the flare gun, then takes a knife and conceals herself in the bathroom. The stranger pounds on the door until it gives way, then storms inside. He helps himself to their food and methodically searches the yacht, making his way to the bathroom. The man lingers in the bathroom, his search slow and deliberate. Julia slips away from him by squeezing out through a gap in the wall. The stranger looks out but can't spot her, until the dog begins barking and gives her position away. The dog tackles her to the ground, and Julia has no choice but to kill it with her knife. The man hears the dog's dying whine, finds its body, and collapses in grief. Using the distraction, Julia circles around the yacht, scales the roof, and re-enters through a broken window. The man spots her first and drops her with a brutal punch. Julia grips the furniture as he tries to drag her away, and manages to kick him off. He stomps on her wrist, forcing her to release the knife. He seizes her by the hair, smashes her face into the floor, throws her onto the sofa, and starts choking her. The children have seen enough. Cassie bursts out from hiding and fires the flare gun directly at the man. The flare ignites a fire that rips through the yacht, and while the kids flee, Julia goes back to kick the man and snatch the coordinate map in their bags. Ben and Cassie collapse over their father's body, and Julia comes to hold them as they cry and say their goodbyes. The attacker staggers from the burning yacht just as it detonates in a massive explosion, and the family runs for their lives. Sometime later, the family reaches a small waterfall and stops to rest. Cassie wonders aloud whether the balloons drew the dangerous man to them, and Ben is overcome with guilt. Julia tells Ben it wasn't his fault and urges the family onward, warning that the stranger is still tracking them. At a small pond along the way, Ben stares in fascination at the beached body of a hammerhead shark. Julia spots the attacker nearly upon them, and the family breaks into a run again. They scramble down a dune and find a stretch of toxic waste they have to navigate around with great care. The family makes it back to the shoreline, but the man is nowhere to be seen. After a few moments, it seems they've finally shaken him off. As they press on, the exposed ocean floor reveals a haunting graveyard of massive dead sea creatures and mountains of plastic. Ben begins to fall behind and Julia recognizes he is becoming dangerously dehydrated, calling a halt to rest. To Julia's alarm, the water bottle is almost completely empty, and Cassie realizes she must not have sealed it properly. Julia snaps at Cassie for being careless, but Cassie fires back that it doesn't matter since they're not going to survive anyway. After a long, heated argument, the family pulls themselves together and pushes on. They eventually stumble across a crashed plane and freeze at a sudden movement, but it turns out to be just birds. The family decides to spend the night sheltering inside the wreck. They share what little food they have, and Julia is heartbroken when she finds a family photo tucked inside Tom's jacket. Cassie asks how her parents first met, and Julia tells the story of Tom arriving at the hospital where she worked as her patient. He won her heart with a bouquet of flowers and a heartfelt poem. In the middle of the night, Cassie slips outside the plane to use the bathroom. The attacker lunges at Cassie from the dark, but Julia is on him first, stabbing him again and again, pouring out every drop of grief and fury inside her. Cassie has to pull her mother off the body and holds her close until she finally calms down. By morning, the man's body is crawling with fleas. The family notices deep bite marks on the corpse, suggesting there is some creature lurking in the area. Once the family moves on, a swarm of crabs pours out from inside the dead man's mouth. A few hours later, Julia and Cassie pause to check the map, but Ben keeps walking even after being told to stop. Ben throws himself at a puddle and buries his face in to drink, and Julia yanks him back, warning that unknown water could make him gravely ill. The family trudges on beneath the savage sun, pulling their coverings tight over their heads. Ben grows dizzy from the heat, and the family stops to rig an improvised shelter for shade. Julia gives Ben a medical injection, and the family agrees to spend the night there. Before sunrise, Julia is jolted awake by an eerie sound coming from outside. She steps out to investigate, and is horrified to find a massive swarm of crabs advancing on them. Julia races back, wakes the kids, and the family sprints away as fast as they can. They spot a huge cargo ship stranded on the ocean floor and run toward it. Discovering 3 survivors still aboard, the female crew member wants to open the door, but the 2 men refuse and barricade themselves in a sealed container, with the crabs closing in fast. Julia and Cassie boost the children up to the top of the container. As Julia starts to climb, the crabs latch onto her leg with savage, crushing force. Ben and Cassie reach down and haul Julia up before the crabs drag her back down. A gap in the container's wall lets half the swarm pour inside toward the crew. The crew members open fire on the crabs, but there are simply too many. The crabs overwhelm and kill 2 of the crew. The sole survivor scrambles toward a hole in the ceiling, but the crabs drag him back down and kill him too. Julia bandages her wounded leg and then loses consciousness. She wakes later in the middle of a raging sandstorm to find herself apparently alone. Panic overtakes her, though she quickly realizes she is not as alone as she feared. She's still alive. She climbs down from the container to search for her kids. Pausing first to take the dead woman's weapon, Cassie comes running back at the sound of her mother's voice and explains that she and Ben went looking for help but found no one. They reunite with Ben, who has found an empty container where the family can wait out the storm. Julia uses Tom's lighter to seal her wounds by cauterization, an agonizing ordeal. When the storm finally dies down, the family discovers a stash of water bottles in a nearby container. Checking the bodies, they also find a radio and a gun. Julia gets now on the radio and tells him she has lost the map. Now reveals he has been under attack from arthropods, monstrous creatures that dwell in the deepest parts of the ocean. Exposure to oxygen has driven the creatures into a violent frenzy. Now urges the family to move immediately. His instruments now show the ocean will return far sooner than expected, leaving them only a few hours. Now fires a flare into the sky and the family sets off in that direction. After a long trek across the barren ocean floor, the family stumbles across a broken toilet and Ben takes the opportunity to use it. The submarine finally comes into view, but a towering rock formation stands between them and safety. As they pick through the rocks, the walls begin to shake and boulders come crashing down in a massive rock slide. Julia shoves her children to safety just in time, then throws herself back to avoid being crushed. A wall of fallen rock now stands between Julia and her children. Julia tells the kids to continue without her, but Cassie refuses and urges her mother to try climbing over. After a fierce back and forth, Julia finally promises she will find her children on the other side. With great reluctance, Cassie grabs her brother and drags him toward the submarine. The kids scramble over the rock formation and reach the submarine, only to find Now collapsed and bleeding on the ground. Now tells them it is too late for him and hands the submarine over to the children. Realizing there is now a spare seat, Cassie turns back to find her mother. On both sides of the rock wall, family members scramble desperately to find one another. On her side of the wall, Julia is confronted by the crab swarm bearing down on her and opens fire. She takes out a few, but the horde is far too vast for her to hold back alone. Cassie appears at the top of the wall and reaches down, and Julia begins hauling herself up on her injured leg. Cassie pulls her mother over the top, and the two run together toward the submarine. Ben stands on the submarine's roof, opening fire to keep the crabs distracted, while his family races to safety. The crabs find Now's body and immediately tear into it. Julia takes the gun and lays down cover fire while shepherding the kids down inside the submarine. With all 3 of them safely inside, Julia realizes she is out of ammo. She hurls the gun at the crabs and seals herself in with her children. The family locks the hatch and watches through the portholes as crabs swarm over the hull. At that moment the ocean comes roaring back, and the 3 strap into their seats and grip each other's hands. The surging waves slam the submarine and hurl it through the water, flooding Julia with visions of everything they have endured, while Cassie is sick again. The piercing high-frequency shriek returns, and the entire family blacks out. Some time later Julia and the children wake up and joyfully confirm they are alive. They climb out to discover the waves have deposited the submarine in the ruins of a flooded city, proof that survival and rebuilding are still possible.